Hans. So we already have our plot. We've decided where to plant. Could you also tell our listeners a little bit about tools and budgeting in terms of what they need to get going?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when we started looking at the plot, we have to also think of protecting the plot. So that comes all into considering with tools, equipment, and so on, and the budgeting. So there were considerations that we made already in terms of water availability. Mm-hmm. We have to certainly see, where does our water come from? Do we need to invest in a water butt, and rather a bigger one, or two butts than having too little, because we want to sparingly use the water and hopefully have a rich soil that we build up with composting. We're talking further down in the line, and fertility management. But plants, you know, England is not a country where it rains a lot, despite the reputation that we have a lot of rain here, but it drizzles a lot and we had a lot of cloud cover. But precipitation, if we get 800 millimeters a year, is a lot. But if you think that for 1 kilo of vegetables, you need 3 times the amount of water through its growing season to actually grow it. So that's a lot of water we need. And so we need to start thinking, well, where are our taps? Do we have a water connection if we want to use the mains? And then do we want to lead that, as we might mention later, also again, into a water butt to evaporate the chlorine? So we need water butts. That needs to go into the budget. We need to start thinking of all the irrigation system. Do we want to use just a watering can if we have enough time at hand? Do we want to establish a whole irrigation system with pipes and with drip irrigation? Or do we want to do exudation, which is the best water-saving device there is, and you don't need pressure for it? So people who are really into the environment, they might think, well, I want to invest in a water system, irrigation system. That's the exudation pipes, the rough pipes of recycled tires, and they go under the soil or just on top of the soil, and they just they're called exudation pipes. They basically sweat and have pores, and they release the water gently. And if you have it at the roots or close to the soil, you save a lot of water, so it's not exposed to being evaporated. The traditional way of irrigation is sprinklers, and we've all seen those, haven't we? In, you know, lawns and things where people sprinkle, but a third of the water by the time it lands on the ground is evaporated by the sun if it's done during the day. So that's a very inefficient way of irrigating the garden. So I think it's worth investing in something more expensive, and you might not want to do that the first year, but kind of think about it already in your budget to have at least, I would say, 150 pounds laid out for just irrigation in the long term. And then you would start looking at tools, basic tools. So what do we need? It would be handy to have a wheelbarrow. It would be handy to have a spade and fork at hand, a digging fork, a digging spade. And we would need a rake, very handy to have, and a heavy hoe, a light hoe for weeding, then maybe a hand trowel and a hand fork. And the other things that we might need is a watering can if we decide to do things by hand in terms of watering. So all that together, depending what you want to spend and where you go, if you want to invest into very good tools, you could go online and look up Bulldog tools and just order it straight offline. But for all those tools, you would probably look at in the region of 150 to 200 pounds. If you go to the garden center, you could get it probably for half that or even less. If you invest in cheap tools, they're cheap. They're not maybe very well balanced. They might strain your back. They might not do the work for you as you'd like, but it's a way maybe to start off if you don't have the budget. Watering cans and irrigation, I would go to garden center suppliers. You can actually order it online, and we can put it on the show notes. I got a good connection that's very cheap for anything that's irrigation, watering cans and things like that. Also, we have to start thinking of protection for the crops. So,
okay, so before you dive into that, Hans, again, I'm thinking there's such a wide range of tools and things that you can get depending on what your needs are. And if you're thinking long term and if you're thinking big, then you may want to invest in an irrigation system, as you say. And also, we were saying earlier on in the series that we are thinking a little bit about the person who's thinking about growing a garden in their own home, in their own backyard, because of the situation, the coronavirus and supermarkets and so on. So what would you say is the very basic for somebody who wants to just get started? I think you said earlier on in the series that it would be helpful to collect rainwater because it would be a better water than getting chlorinated water. So you'd need some sort of a barrel or some sort of container that takes water. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. And take it straight off the roof if you can, or take it from the water supply, from the mains, and evaporate the chlorine or whatever other fluoride, whatever is in the water that's harmful for the plants and soil organisms.
By leaving it standing for half a day or so?
Yeah, half a day, that will be enough to evaporate it. If you stir it a bit, even better. If you put a bit of bentonite or just natural clay or something in it, it will also bind all those substances.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you've got your container, then you take your watering can straight from there and put it in the garden.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that would be the simplest and cheapest and
cheapest way of doing it. And if you don't even have money for a watering can, if you have, I worked in overseas countries. There was no resources, so we made do with whatever that was available. If you've got a 5-liter watering bottle, and you pinch a few holes in it, and you have a handle on there usually, and you just hold it over your plants in the garden, you just go over with that, and then you have a watering can. You can be as inventive and creative as you want. That's probably an investment of what, $150, instead of maybe a good watering can is maybe £15. So you're saving already 90% of your budget. I think people need to start looking at that, but I would certainly say the essential part to have really at hand is a good digging spade, a digging fork, a hoe and a rake, and also a long handle hoe for hoeing the weeds. So you're not on your knees pulling the weeds out with your fingers, and you're working, overtime.
Okay, so we understand the basics and the simplest and cheapest way of getting started. Yeah. However, if you want more information, those of you out there, Hans runs this series of videos where he will be talking more in detail about things, and in that you will be talking in more detail about irrigation systems and so on, I assume.
And we'll see the examples, we'll film them, so you look at kind of not a hands-on but a eyes-on experience.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all separated right now.
Great. So we've got our tools. We have our basic or more complex irrigation system. You were now talking about guarding your crops.
Yeah. So in terms of budget, of course, another thing, because we were on the budget, is to consider the seeds. And depending how big your garden is, if you have got a good sized garden for a family, you would probably get away by ordering seeds if you want to include also flowers of around £50 for the growing season. And that means you will probably have seeds left over for the following year. And if you keep your seeds in a cool environment, which has a steady sort of narrow range temperature between 16 to 20 degrees or something like that, a bit cooler is even better. Some people put the seed in the fridge or in a cellar or into a garden shed in the shade of the trees. You will keep your seeds. Most of the seeds will last you 3 to 5 years. There's one exception, which is parsnip. But if you keep them in that kind of environment, dry, of course, not moist, so they need to be nicely, packed into jam jars or whatever, with a bit of holes in the lid, so there's a bit of aeration, but they're usually dry in there. There's no damp coming in, and they can breathe. So I would say, you can invest now. You will have them 3 to 5 years. Maybe a package of seed, usually for a general size garden, lasts you between 1 and 2 years. So that's between 40 to 60 pounds. So you have to consider that also. Okay. And then last but not least.
Sorry, and we are talking a bit more in a later episode about seeds and how to plant them and so on.
Absolutely.
But at this moment, would you say that it may be worth buying a bigger pack of seeds and then storing them rather than maybe buying the 100 seeds? Or, normally if you go to the seed cooperative, you can, if you want to buy lettuce, for example, you've got 100 seeds, you've got 1.5 grams, you've got 5 grams, 10 grams. What would you recommend?
Well, there's two approaches here. One would be to actually go, well, with some varieties, I might be actually wanting to let some plants go to seed, let them flower and go to seed, the best ones I have, and collect my own seed in my own environment. So these plants, they would be more like the heirloom varieties or the landrace varieties that are adapted more and more to your microclimate, and you get better plants. And we will be having courses in summer also of how to collect seeds. So if you come on, we can talk about how to actually collect the seed, how to select the seed, how to grow the seed plants so you get the best offspring for the next generation. So maybe a third or so of your seed you could even, just collect yourself and reuse. And in terms of other seeds, you might want to make a plan and say, well, from different families, because they cross-pollinate, obviously, the cabbage plants, if you have one variety, another, they cross-pollinate and cancel each other out and make F1 hybrids. You want to make maybe a list of each family of one seed you collect, but then the other plants you will either buy more or have the 1 season, 2 season supply and, buy again next year. I see the whole seed provision market and the suppliers growing because they are really expanding in their production. I wouldn't think there's going to be a shortage of seed.
Yes, and that would be a minimal part of your budget anyway. I mean, if you're looking at biodynamic seed, for what I can gather, you can buy seeds, 100 seeds for, sometimes £3 or something like that. So again, depending on what you buy, it would be just a few quid here and there.
Yeah, it's like between 150 and £3, depending on the kind of plant and how much it takes them to actually harvest them. So you see in the price reflected the work that goes into producing the seed, basically. It's not like the ones on the supermarket shelf where they're all £1 or 99 pence and they're all the same because they've all been produced in a laboratory or in a very sterile environment, controlled environment in Africa somewhere, where they actually disowned local people of their land to produce that seed. So if you go for organic biodynamic seed, you're actually acting socially and humanly responsible, ethically responsible, because it's produced here in England, and it's also seed that will then relate to your climate zone and to your soil. You don't have to excessively manure them or pamper them. They're much more resistant and resilient.
And it's seed that will give you more as well.
And they give you?
It will give you more. It will give you better quality. It will be better for your soil, and it will be better for you.
On all round, in any respect, those seeds will be better for you. Even you spend a bit more money on there, they're more valuable.
Great. So we've spent some money on tools. We've spent some money on some sort of an irrigation system, and we've also spent some money on seeds. Are we keeping track of how much money we spent already? So you said 150.
The budget is sort of running at £300.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And you are now talking about protecting your crops as well.
Yeah. So crop covers, both in terms of early cropping, late cropping to protect crops from frost. But then also there might be certain plants that, like the cabbage family, and this year I've even seen in some places the Swiss chard and the spinach family. The pigeons are a huge issue. So excuse me, those who are vegan or vegetarian, they're actually a pest and they need to be decimated because they've gone out of hand. They don't have predators, prey birds, the buzzards and eagles and all those birds they have decimated because of modern agriculture and poisons, pesticide poisoning. And we need to actually start taking control as two-legged predators to balance the population. And the same is true for deer and rabbits and everything else because they are totally out of hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So protective covers, you can be going very simple and just get yourself some polythene piping, water piping from the plumbing center, and put up your hoops, and then you would go to LBS, which we can also put in the show notes. It's a garden supplier. They do fleece, which is the protective cover, plastic cover, which is semi-permeable. So you can water through it, the rain goes through it, the light goes through it pretty well, and it's a protection from losing too much moisture in summer, losing too much heat in spring and late autumn, winter when you want to extend your growing season. And it protects your plants also from pests and diseases, and big and small. So okay. I would say they invest, at least for maybe half the garden size in cover for the crops, and that could run maybe in the region of £30 for a 50-meter roll.
And since you're saying that you would cover up, that it would protect you from losing moisture in the summer, and then also from cold temperatures in early spring and late autumn, are you suggesting that all crops are covered all the time?
I don't do that because I prefer plants being exposed to the elements. But if you have an issue and you might not be out enough in the garden, you might not have your own dog or cat, which cats is a whole nother story, but dogs usually, they keep all the wildlife away. Sometimes you end up in certain gardens, and not all gardens, where you have that infestation of rabbits or the pigeons, and short of putting, a fence around your garden or a hedge, the rabbits still get through, the deer won't. You have to really play it by ear. What's the situation in your own garden, and then take your measures. And the fleece, the garden fleece, is the easiest way to deal with it. It's plastic. It will rip eventually. The sun rays and cosmic rays are so strong, it will not last longer than 3-4 years. It becomes a waste product. But we're dying one death, as we say in German.
Okay. So,
and we don't want to die of starvation, do we?
Of course we don't. So is there anything else that we need to budget for?
I think in terms of, depending where you are and how resourceful you are, I mean, there's garden, the sticks for the climbing plants, but you can just go in the forest and cut your hazel sticks, out of your hedge. Your peas need support. Your beans, your broad beans and things need support. If the winds pick up, you might want to invest in some nice strong garden string, but that's minimum investment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I think we have everything, basically what we need just to get started.
Yeah.
And
so
get going. I mean, it takes us through the growing season.
And we will also be talking about the biodynamic preparations later in the series, which also come into the budgeting. We were talking about something in the region of £25 if you go for the spray preparations and the compost preparations.
Yeah.
So I guess putting it all together, we've already got the tools, we have got the covers and the protection, we've got the irrigation system, and then we've got the seeds, and we have got the compost preparation and spray preparation. So again, I suppose...
Sorry, if I may interrupt, just to finish off with the budgeting, then just to give people a little bit of a comparison, because it might sound a lot, at the end of the day, you might be spending £400 to invest. Now that's your initial investment. That will actually, be amortized in 4 to 5 years. Easily, you're spending actually £50 per year. Mm-hmm. If you look at, wear and tear and all that, or even less. Whereas if you go and buy your vegetables through a box scheme or a community-supported agriculture project, usually the membership fee just for the year is usually between £250, £400. Or if you think of a box of vegetables that you get the basic in-season vegetables from Riverford or Cole and Abel or suppliers like that, you're looking at 25 to £30 per box, and that's like a week's supply of vegetables. So in fact, if you multiply that through the year, your budget is actually minimal. It's just, obviously, it's a bit of a bite into your pocket to invest in the first place. But I think what we need to look there also is social awareness, that your neighbors might have the tools, and why don't you start actually teaming up and sharing tools and resources?
Yeah, so again, I can see that as you were saying earlier on, as the more creative you are, the less you may spend. And so some people may already have the tools. As you say, you may ask from a neighbor or something like that. But again, bringing back the watering can example, you can spend £15 buying a new watering can, or you can, as you say, take one of those 5-litre water containers, punch a few holes through it, and you have a watering can. Or you can get your hazel sticks from the woods, free of charge. So you could spend, in fact, a lot less than £300 or £400. There may be certain things you don't have, like the covers, but certain other things I'm sure you will have, and you can find other ways of getting what you need.
And if I may just give a last example about the budget, because we certainly have to consider for people who are starting from scratch, they might not have any compost material. But it's as easy as taking a bag, going into the forest and scraping off a few leaves. You're not going to leave the forest impoverished, because there's plenty of humus available, or any area where leaves are blown up, or an old leaf mold pile, or where you see organic waste. And then later we'll be talking how to use that. Or you might have to bite the sour apple and invest in a bulk bag of compost or bags from the garden center. Then you might be spending another 50 quid on your fertilizer and manuring capacity for that first year. So that's again up to you how you handle that.
Okay, great.